He was a millionaire, powerful, respected, untouchable. But the night he was about to sign the biggest deal of his life, a cleaning lady whispered just 2 words that changed everything. "Don't sign it." Everyone thought she was crazy, until the truth came out and it destroyed everything he thought he knew about trust, loyalty, and love. This is the story of the cleaning lady who saved a millionaire. The glass walls of the executive office reflected the glowing city lights below. David Miller sat behind a marble desk, worth more than some people's homes, pen in hand, ready to seal a billion-dollar merger. Years of ambition and sacrifice had led him to this moment. His reflection looked back at him confident, powerful, untouchable. But as he brought the pen closer to the page, a soft voice whispered behind him, "Don't sign it. It's a trap." The words sliced through the silence like a blade. David froze, turning sharply to see the cleaning lady Anna standing by the doorway, her hands trembling slightly. For a second, their eyes met, and he saw no fear in hers, only warning. "Excuse me?" he demanded, his tone cold, dismissive. She lowered her gaze. "Please, sir, just don't sign." The absurdity of the moment made him scoff. A janitor telling him David Miller how to handle business. He shook his head and waved her away. "Get back to work. You have no idea what you're talking about." But even as the door closed behind her, something about her voice lingered, a tone too calm, too knowing. He stared down at the contract again. The ink shimmered under the lights, his signature line empty and waiting. He thought of Leandro, his best friend and partner, urging him to finalize the deal. Of Sophia, his ex, and now the company's legal advisor, assuring him everything was airtight. Everyone he trusted said this merger was perfect. So why did the words "it's a trap" echo louder than his own thoughts? David leaned back, his chest tight. For the first time in years, he hesitated. That single moment, that pause, would change everything. He capped his pen, turned off the desk lamp, and told himself he'd sign it tomorrow. But somewhere deep inside, he already knew tomorrow would never come the way he expected. As he walked toward the elevator, he caught a glimpse of Anna again. She was polishing the floor, pretending not to look at him. The silence between them was heavy, charged. "What did you mean by that?" he asked suddenly. She froze but didn't turn. "You'll see soon enough," she said softly. The elevator doors closed with a metallic sigh. David stood motionless inside, feeling something unfamiliar doubt. He had built his empire by never questioning himself. Now, the whisper of a cleaning lady haunted him more than a room full of investors. That night, sleep eluded him. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw her face steady, honest, terrified. Why would she say that? He muttered to himself. His mind, once sharp as a blade, now spiraled with questions. Outside, the storm began. Thunder cracked over the skyline, mirroring the turmoil inside him. Somewhere in the shadows of his own company, betrayal was already blooming, and Anna was the only one who saw it coming. Morning sunlight poured through the panoramic windows of David's office, but it felt cold. He sat at his desk, staring at the unsigned contract, his coffee untouched. His assistant reminded him that the board expected his signature within hours. "I'll get to it," he said curtly, but his hand didn't move. The whisper echoed again, soft, urgent, unforgettable. "Don't sign it. It's a trap." He could still hear the tremor in her voice. Why had she sounded so sure? He prided himself on being a man of reason, not superstition, yet the unease gnawed at him, quiet and relentless. He called the legal team, asking for a fresh copy of the merger documents. "Again, sir?" Sophia's voice came through the phone, light and teasing. "You've read them 3 times. "Then I'll make it 4, he snapped. "Send them." As soon as she hung up, David noticed something strange. The revised version had different numbering in key clauses. Clause 47.3. The one detailing post-merger asset control had been slightly altered. Not enough for a layperson to see, but enough to shift power completely. His pulse quickened. He cross-referenced the files and realized the truth. Someone had inserted hidden ownership terms that would transfer 80% of his holdings to an offshore entity. David leaned back, breathless. Could Anna possibly have known this? How? The thought struck him like lightning. He needed to find her, not to accuse, but to understand. The janitor might be the only person who saw what no one else dared to. But when he called HR, the answer chilled him. Ana Duarte? She's been terminated. Effective this morning. Terminated? He repeated, his tone sharp. By whose order? There was a pause. Leandro Torres, sir. For a moment, David said nothing. He ended the call and looked out the window, the city below now looking foreign. The trap had been set long before Anna's whisper. He just hadn't been listening. Sometimes the smallest voice can change everything. If this moment made you feel something, take a second to subscribe, because the next chapter will show just how far one whisper can go. Stay with us. The story's only beginning. David entered the boardroom with the quiet confidence of a man used to control, but something inside him felt fractured. The long glass table reflected faces that once inspired trust. Leandro's charming smile, Sophia's polished professionalism. Every handshake suddenly felt hollow. As he opened the folder before him, his eyes lingered on the altered clauses again, a reminder that deception hid beneath the company's sleek surface. He tested the waters. Before we proceed, I want a full internal audit of the merger details. Leandro laughed smoothly, masking irritation. Come on, David, we've been through this. The numbers are solid, Sophia chimed in, her tone velvet smooth. You're overthinking, love. Trust us. But the word trust struck differently now. It tasted bitter. David's silence unsettled the room. He leaned forward and said calmly, If there's nothing to hide, then you won't mind the audit. Leandro's jaw tightened for the briefest second, but enough for David to catch it. He saw for the first time not partnership, but performance. Something dark twisted behind those smiles. The meeting ended in uneasy quiet. As David gathered his papers, he noticed an envelope on his chair. Inside was a typed note. Stop digging or you'll lose more than your company. His blood ran cold. The boardroom lights flickered, and for the first time he realized he wasn't paranoid. Someone wanted him blind and silent. That night he stood by his office window, staring at the city that had once symbolized victory. Below the towers of glass and ambition, he imagined the world Anna came from honest work, no hidden traps. Somehow the woman who scrubbed his floors saw clearer than the men who sat beside him, and that terrified him more than the threat itself. The next morning David arrived early, determined to find Anna. Her cart was gone, her locker empty, as if she'd never existed. He called HR again, demanding answers, but all he received were corporate shrugs. She violated confidentiality, they repeated. His temper flared. Confidentiality about what? The silence on the other end said everything. Someone had erased her to protect the lie. He went to the security office and reviewed the night's footage. Half the recordings were missing. The parts that remained showed Anna leaving the building escorted by 2 guards, her head held high. Even in dismissal, she didn't look defeated. That image, her quiet dignity, struck him deeper than any board betrayal could. Back in his office, a janitor's rag lay forgotten near the corner of his desk. Beneath it, a folded scrap of paper. He opened it carefully. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. They're not who you think they are. His chest tightened as if the words themselves carried weight. It wasn't just warning, it was proof she'd risked her job for him. For hours, David sat in silence, piecing together fragments of deceit. The contract changes, the missing files, Anna's sudden firing, they all pointed in one direction. Leandro, his best friend since university, the man who'd built this empire beside him. Betrayal had a familiar face, and that made it unbearable. As dusk fell, David made a decision. He would find Anna not as a CEO, but as a man searching for truth. He knew she held the key to everything, and deep down, a quiet voice whispered, "You owe her more than you know." David drove through the rain-soaked streets until city lights gave way to narrow alleys and modest apartments. He finally found Anna's address, a small, cracked building with flickering hallway lights. When she opened the door, surprise crossed her face, quickly replaced by caution. "Why are you here?" she asked softly. He hesitated, soaked to the bone, and said only, "Because I should have listened." Inside, the apartment smelled of coffee and old books. A frail woman, Anna's mother, rested on a couch nearby, wrapped in blankets. David took in the sight silently. Peeling walls, unpaid bills stacked on a shelf, a life lived in quiet struggle. "You warned me about something you couldn't prove," he said. "How did you know?" Anna looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "Because I've seen it before." She led him to a small desk piled with papers. There, among old reports and folders, were documents from her past spreadsheets, audit logs, official seals. "I used to be a financial analyst," she confessed, "until your friend Leandro ruined my career." Her voice didn't tremble. It carried the weight of truth. David's breath caught. Leandro's betrayal wasn't new, it was a pattern. Anna explained how she had uncovered fraud in Leandro's previous company and tried to expose it. He retaliated, framing her for the crime. Since then, no corporation would hire her. "So I cleaned floors for the people who live off others' lies," she said bitterly. David felt shame for every moment he'd dismissed her, every assumption he'd made based on status. Before leaving, he looked back at her. "Help me stop him," he said firmly. She studied him, searching for sincerity. When she finally nodded, a quiet alliance was born, forged not from wealth or power, but from shared wounds and the need for justice. The following days were a blur of secrecy and tension. David and Anna worked late into the night, meeting in cafes and empty parking lots to avoid suspicion. She guided him through financial trails, showing how hidden transactions bled the company dry. For the first time, David wasn't the teacher, he was the student, humbled and fascinated by her brilliance. Their partnership grew stronger with every discovery. Anna moved through data like a detective, her intuition sharp and methodical. David provided access to internal systems, while she connected the dots. But each answer revealed darker questions, offshore accounts, shell companies, and false signatures that all led back to Leandro and Sophia. Danger soon followed. One evening, David returned to his apartment to find his door slightly open. Inside, his files were gone. A note on the counter read, "You're crossing the wrong line." He burned with anger, not fear. They knew he was investigating, but they underestimated the fire that betrayal had lit inside him. Anna insisted on caution, but David's resolve hardened. "They think they can scare me," he said, his tone low. "They've taken my company, my name, and almost my sanity. I'm done playing nice." She watched him silently, torn between admiration and worry. His pride could save him or destroy them both. As they left their secret meeting that night, headlights flickered across the parking lot following them. Anna grabbed his arm. "We're not safe anymore." He nodded, gripping her hand tightly. The empire he built was now his cage, but for the first time, he wasn't facing it alone. The truth hit David like a slow-burning fire. Anna's latest findings laid everything bare. Leandro and Sophia had built a web of fake subsidiaries, each funneling millions from the merger deal. The betrayal wasn't impulsive, it was planned for years, precise as a surgeon's cut. As he stared at the evidence, the weight of it all pressed on his chest like stone. His best friend had been preparing his ruin since the beginning. Leandro's charm, his loyalty, his laughter. All memories now felt poisoned. David couldn't decide what hurt more, the deceit or his blindness. Anna watched quietly, her presence grounding him. "You trusted him," she said softly. "That's not weakness. It's what makes you human." He nodded, but deep down he didn't feel human. He felt hunted. He arranged a meeting under the pretext of signing final papers. When Leandro entered the office, confident and casual, David confronted him with the documents. For a heartbeat, silence ruled the room, then Leandro smiled. "You finally figured it out," he said coldly. "Took you long enough." His arrogance chilled David to the core. Sophia appeared moments later, calm and venomous. "Shayu can't stop this," she murmured. "Everything's already in motion, and when it's over, no one will believe you." The two of them walked out together, leaving David alone with the sound of his own breathing. The trap had closed, and he was the prey inside it. That night, headlines exploded across the media. CEO under investigation for fraud. Bank accounts were frozen, board members panicked, and David's name burned in scandal. Somewhere in the chaos, Leandro smiled for the cameras, playing the role of the betrayed partner. But David knew the truth, and so did Anna. The empire David had built began to crumble. News anchors dissected his fall, analysts called him reckless, and investors fled like birds before a storm. His mansion felt empty, stripped of warmth and dignity. The same people who once begged for his attention now refused to answer his calls. Reputation, he realized, was more fragile than glass. Anna stood by him through it all, her resolve unshaken. "They want you broken," she said one night, as they reviewed stolen files in his darkened office. "That's how they win." He glanced at her, exhaustion shadowing his eyes. "Then we won't give them that." It was the first time in weeks that his voice carried strength instead of doubt. The board of directors, manipulated by Leandro, suspended David indefinitely. Public statements accused him of financial misconduct and ethical breaches. Anna urged him to disappear for a while, but he refused. "If I run, I prove them right," he said. The pride that once blinded him now fueled his defiance. But the cost was high. Paparazzi stalked his every move, reporters camped outside his home, and death threats began arriving by email. Still, Anna refused to abandon him. "You stood up for truth when you didn't have to," she told him. "Now it's my turn." She spent nights searching company databases for one last piece of proof to clear his name. Then one evening, David arrived at her apartment and found the door ajar. Papers scattered across the floor, computer still glowing. But Anna was gone. On the screen, one sentence blinked at him from a half-written message. "I found the file that changes everything." His heart stopped. She had gone after it alone. David drove like a madman through the city, the night blurring into streaks of light. The address Anna had traced led to a corporate data center on the outskirts, the same one Leandro used to store encrypted files. When he arrived, the gates were open, guards scattered, alarms blaring. He rushed inside, shouting her name, his heart pounding like a drum of dread. The echo of his voice met only silence. In the server room, Anna stood surrounded by security officers, her wrists restrained. "She was hacking into confidential files," one guard barked. David's fury exploded. She was uncovering a crime. But his words fell on deaf ears. Anna's eyes found his, calm and resigned. "It's okay," she whispered. "You know the truth now. That's what matters." It felt like a goodbye disguised as courage. Police arrived minutes later. Cameras flashed as Anna was led away in handcuffs, her expression unbroken. David wanted to scream, to tear down every wall in that building, but he knew rage wouldn't free her. The trap had shifted. Now she was the prisoner in his place. Watching her disappear into the flashing lights, he felt a hollow ache deeper than any loss of wealth. He returned to his penthouse that night, the city below indifferent to his pain. Her laptop sat on his desk, recovered by a sympathetic guard. Inside were fragments of financial codes, encrypted files, and a trail that pointed to offshore accounts in Leandro's name. She had found the evidence and sacrificed her freedom to protect it. For the first time, David understood the true cost of integrity. Anna had lost everything once because of Leandro, and now she had risked it again to save him. He swore to himself that this time the truth would not be buried. This time he would burn their empire of lies to the ground. 2 days later, David stood outside the courthouse facing the media frenzy. Reporters shouted questions about Anna's arrest, about his suspension, about his fall from grace. He ignored them all. The only thing that mattered now was freeing her and finishing what she started. Inside his coat pocket was the flash drive recovered from her laptop, encrypted and pulsing like a heartbeat of truth. He turned to an old ally, Raphael, a cybersecurity expert who once worked for his company. "If anyone can crack this, it's you," David said. They worked through the night, piecing together fragments of data. By dawn, the screen lit up with a hidden ledger transactions, fake invoices, shell corporations. Leandro and Sophia's names were all over it. The evidence was undeniable. With proof finally in hand, David reached out to the board, calling for an emergency meeting. "You wanted answers," he said coldly. "Now you'll have them." Meanwhile, he arranged legal support for Anna, hiring the best defense lawyer in São Paulo. The system that once buried her would now witness her vindication. As the day of reckoning approached, David and Anna met briefly in the courthouse holding room. She looked exhausted, but radiant in defiance. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "You'll lose everything." He shook his head. "I already did. Now I'm taking it back." For the first time she smiled small, proud, unbreakable. That night, alone in his office, David stared at the city skyline one last time before the storm. "Tomorrow," he murmured to the empty room, "they'll see who we really are." The world that once worshipped him for his power would soon fear him for his truth. The war for justice had finally begun. The boardroom, once a symbol of control, now felt like a battlefield. Cameras lined the walls, journalists waited outside, and every executive sat with tension etched into their faces. David entered wearing a calm expression that masked the storm within. He placed a folder on the table, the evidence Anna had risked everything to find. The room fell silent as he began to speak. "I built this company on trust," he said, his voice steady, "and I was betrayed by those closest to me." He clicked a remote, and the projector illuminated the damning documents. Bank transfers, offshore accounts, falsified signatures. Each slide tore another piece from Leandro's perfect mask. Whispers spread like wildfire as Sophia's face turned pale. Leandro stood abruptly, his facade cracking. "You can't prove anything," he barked. David's gaze hardened. "I don't have to. The numbers speak for themselves." He handed copies of the files to the board, every detail traceable, every crime undeniable. Sophia's voice trembled as she tried to interject, but David cut her off. "You betrayed this company. You betrayed me." Security guards stepped in as murmurs rose. The board chairman cleared his throat, eyes wide with shock. "Mr. Miller," he said, "is what we're seeing authentic?" David nodded. "Every number verified by third-party auditors, every signature confirmed." At that moment, Leandro's composure shattered. He lunged forward, shouting, but the guards restrained him as cameras flashed like lightning. As Leandro and Sophia were escorted out, David stood still, breathing deeply. The same room that once echoed with greed now resounded with truth. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, he had won a battle that mattered. Justice had a voice, and it spoke through him. In the days that followed, the scandal consumed the headlines. CEO clears his name. Betrayal exposed. Leandro and Sophia faced charges of corporate fraud and embezzlement, while David's name began to rise from the ashes. Yet victory didn't feel triumphant. It felt heavy, earned through pain and loss. His empire was intact, but he was not the same man who had once ruled it. David visited Anna the morning she was released. She stepped out of the courthouse, sunlight warming her face, freedom softening her expression. For a moment they just looked at each other, no words, only shared relief. Then quietly he said, "I couldn't have done this without you." She smiled faintly. "You could have, but you didn't want to be that kind of man anymore." At a press conference later that week, David addressed the public. "I made mistakes," he admitted. "I trusted the wrong people, and I forgot what integrity means. But someone reminded me that honesty has no rank." The crowd fell silent. His words weren't polished, they were real, and for the first time, the world saw not a millionaire, but a man reborn. Afterward, he asked Anna to return not as an employee, but as a leader. "I want you to rebuild this company with me," he said, "as vice president of operations." Her eyes widened, disbelief flickering before resolve. "If we do this," she replied, "we do it differently, no corruption, no ego." He nodded. No lies. The office lights dimmed that evening as they stood side by side, overlooking the skyline. For David, redemption wasn't in the applause or restored fortune, it was in her quiet strength beside him. The empire would rise again, but this time its foundation would be truth. Months passed, and the company that once bled corruption began to breathe again. Under Anna's leadership, transparency replaced secrecy, and ethics became the new measure of success. Employees felt valued, decisions were made with purpose, and profit followed naturally. David watched it all with quiet admiration. humbled by how effortlessly she inspired others. The empire he rebuilt now reflected the heart he had almost lost. The board, once consumed by greed, began to mirror her integrity. Philanthropic initiatives blossomed: scholarships, community centers, programs for low-income families. David saw firsthand what true leadership looked like: not control, but compassion. Each change felt like a piece of redemption carved from the ruins of his past arrogance. Anna's influence was no longer subtle, it was transformative. David's presence in the office softened. He greeted staff by name, listened more than he spoke, and found joy in connection rather than dominance. The man who once measured success in numbers now measured it in lives changed. Still, beneath his calm, something deeper stirred an emotion that had grown quietly between late nights and shared victories. One evening, after a long day, Anna and David stood on the rooftop terrace overlooking the city. "You saved more than a company," he said softly. "You saved me." She smiled, looking at the skyline glowing in gold and silver. "You saved yourself, David. I just reminded you where to look." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with understanding. As they left the terrace, their hands brushed lightly, a fleeting touch that carried months of unspoken feelings. The world below moved on, unaware that the story of two unlikely allies had become something deeper, something fragile and real. For the first time, David felt truly rich. It began slowly: late-night talks turning into shared laughter, glances that lingered longer than they should. David found peace in Anna's presence, and she found trust in his. What had started as gratitude transformed into something tender and undeniable. Still, Anna hesitated, afraid that love might undo the independence she had fought so hard to reclaim. One evening, as rain tapped softly against his office windows, David spoke. "You don't have to be afraid of losing yourself," he said. "You've helped me find mine." His voice carried no charm, no arrogance, only truth. Anna looked at him for a long time before whispering, "I spent years believing love only made me weaker, but maybe, with you, it makes me stronger." Their relationship grew quietly, away from gossip and eyes that judged. In a world driven by appearances, theirs was built on scars, trust, and shared redemption. Together they faced board negotiations, corporate resistance, and public skepticism. But none of it mattered. They had already survived worse betrayal, ruin, and doubt. Everything else was noise. Months later, during a charity gala celebrating the company's rebirth, David stood on stage beside Anna. Cameras flashed as he announced new initiatives for social equality, ending his speech with unexpected words. "And to the woman who taught me that true wealth is integrity, thank you." The room erupted in applause, but Anna's eyes shimmered with something beyond pride. Later that night, under the soft glow of city lights, David took her hand. "No contracts this time," he murmured with a smile. "Just a promise." And there, in the quiet rhythm of the city they had rebuilt, she whispered, "I'll sign that one." The morning sun filtered through the tall glass windows of the headquarters, painting the floor in shades of gold. Months had passed since the storm, and peace finally felt real. David and Anna had transformed not only a company, but a culture. Employees smiled when they entered the building, something that hadn't happened in years. The empire once built on greed now stood on the quiet strength of honesty. Their wedding was simple, elegant, and far from the extravagance expected of a millionaire. A small ceremony in a garden surrounded by those who had walked through the fire with them. No reporters, no flashing cameras, just two souls who had learned the meaning of loss, trust, and forgiveness. When they exchanged vows, David's voice trembled slightly. "You showed me what wealth really means," he said, and Anna's tears carried every word straight to his heart. Together, they continued building something greater than profit. Foundations for underprivileged families, scholarships for women in finance, and programs that hired ex-convicts seeking second chances. Anna led with compassion. David followed with conviction. Their partnership became a model of what business could be when guided by purpose, not power. One evening, as they locked the office doors for the last time before a long-awaited vacation, David paused. "Remember the first night you warned me not to sign?" he asked with a smile. Anna laughed softly. "And you didn't listen until it was almost too late." "I did listen," he replied, "just not with my ears." They walked out together, their hands intertwined, their hearts at peace. As they reached their car, a courier approached with a sealed envelope. "Delivery for Mr. Miller," he said before vanishing into the night. David opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter bearing the logo of an old investment firm, and a familiar signature. "It's from someone named Adrian Voss," Anna read aloud. David's smile faded slightly. "He's the man who taught Leandro everything he knew." Their eyes met. The past, it seemed, wasn't finished with them yet. In the end, he learned that money can build empires, but it can't buy honesty. Sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who save us. What about you? Have you ever met someone who changed your life in an unexpected way? Share your story in the comments, hit like if this touched your heart. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional millionaire stories like this one, because every story deserves to be heard.